only patients were diabetic. That was it. And so I'm there. I was 35. And during my stay of 10 days, I discovered 5 people who were already blind from diabetes. 4 were younger than me. I was 35. And 1 about 5 years older. It took me 30 years to realize how severe this disease is. I saw it. These 5 people. 1 was just right across the hall from me. 1 was next door to me. And boy, he was blaming any and everyone for his problem. In and out of the hospital, 27 years old, and he was blind. 27. 2 years before this, I had a massive hemorrhage in my right eye. So I resolved to help people, to help them feel better every day, to support them so that they wouldn't have to face such devastating results. That decision helped me get better control of my diabetes as well. And so in the fall of 1992, I started a diabetes support group at the Good Samaritan Hospital in Kearney, Nebraska, the hub of the area, about 35,000 people there. I was 39, and I had had diabetes for 32 years. For the first meeting, we met at the public library, in fact, for the first meeting. Public library. 35 people attended. I put it on public service announcements on radio, and people attended. And it was just us. There wasn't any healthcare people. It was just us people with diabetes who were there. I introduced myself for the next several years. Of course, we began to meet at the hospital. But for the next several years, I was able to encourage hundreds of people during that time. Many people will not admit that they have diabetes or any chronic disease. Their disease is private, their secret. What is missing with that attitude? The opportunity not only to help others, but to help themselves as well. Eventually, the hospital in Kearney, Nebraska, hired a certified diabetes educator. And one day, I received a call from her. She just started helping with the meetings that we had. And one day I received a call from her telling me that there was a 33-year-old non-compliant patient with type 1 diabetes in the hospital. Would I visit him? And of course I agreed I would. He would not cooperate, even putting the sheets over his head when they entered his room. And when I asked to come into his hospital room, identifying myself as a fellow type 1, he invited me in and opened up to me. We talked about the challenges we both faced. He had great difficulty in keeping his blood sugar under control. He had never had any support or encouragement. His mom was not helpful. Friends of hers had even influenced him to drink. So after being released from the hospital, he attended the support group meetings. That's Randy, by the way. That's him. Right there. So we also met every week. I shared portions from a book, Diabetes, a Guide for Living Well by Dr. Gary Arsham. Dr. Arsham was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 10. And unlike today, there were few books available for people with diabetes in 1994. I could think of a couple. Now there are hundreds. Next to nothing back then. So in a sense, he became, the doctor who wrote the book, became part of the weekly meetings. People need encouragement. And Randy started doing better with his blood sugar levels, but he already had kidney failure. He began peritoneal dialysis. You have 2 different kinds. You can see them. And so he started that at home. And of course, he'd hook up for all night with that. Not only did we use the diabetes guidebook, but we looked at encouraging proverbs. He started coming to Bible class. And when he began attending, his mom wanted to know why in the world he was doing that. He said because he had never tried it before. He was starting a lot of new things, like routinely checking his blood sugar. He also wanted to see if attending Bible class would make a difference, and it did. One day after eating lunch together, as we traveled toward my office, we saw a lawn that needed mowing. And the person who lived there was a widow, a recluse, whose husband had died in World War II. I casually said that we should just mow her lawn. And after saying that, I went on a trip out of state. Well, I actually went from Nebraska to Oklahoma. When I got back, I discovered Randy had taken his mower in the trunk of his car and mowed the whole lawn, taking the cuttings to the dump. Now remember, he's on peritoneal dialysis. He didn't have a lot of strength. He went over there, put his mower in the back, cut it, made several trips to the dump with the cuttings, emptied it, went back, continued to mow. I asked him, did she ever say anything to you? He said, yeah. What are you doing? There was no thanks, no gratitude, but Randy was practicing God's wisdom. The statement, blessed is the one who is kind to the needy. It doesn't matter if they say thank you or not. Blessed is the one who is kind to the needy. And that's the kind of behavior a Christian should have. So a few days later, he became a Christian, being baptized into Christ. Never gone to church before in his life. Kidney and pancreas transplant. Randy was on a kidney transplant list, and not long after this wonderful news arrived, a kidney and a pancreas. And when he received that pancreas, he was no longer in the community of people with diabetes. He had left me. But I'm thankful. I was thankful. Countering this good news was a terrible news, because several months later, he was in a car train wreck. Guess who won? The train won. He was flown immediately to Omaha with a broken femur, ribs, arm, severe trauma to his head. I went to see him. I didn't even, his head was just swollen. I didn't even recognize him. He was in months, I mean months of recovery. How did he stay encouraged during those weeks and months of therapy? He focused on good things. He said, just as Paul walked on water, keeping his eyes on Jesus. Well, we know it was Peter. But he was learning. I keep my eyes on Jesus. And here's a question he asked me. What's the most rewarding thing about your job? What is most rewarding? I said. And this could be for anyone. I don't care what your occupation is when I see people encouraged and helped. That's the most rewarding thing. There he was in that therapy all that time. And so that was one of the little things that happened to me that really motivated me. When I started that diabetes support group in Kearney, Nebraska, first of all, I talked to a doctor. Now, I did have a local doctor who helped me get it started, but there was a doctor who had started a diabetes support group before that, and it just kind of dwindled. He said, people just didn't have the interest. Well, I was highly motivated. And I've never stopped since. I don't care how many people show up. I am motivated to help people. And so here we are. We're at one of these meetings. About 25 people in attendance one night. And one of the people who was there that night, she just didn't get much exercise, and she had said, is it okay if I ask a question at the end of the meeting? I need help in getting started to walk. And I said, sure, that'll be okay. And she said, I want to start walking. I need help to do it. I want to meet at the park up here on the way to Norman. And I need help in starting. I asked the group, I said, would anyone be willing to go walk with her? 3 people raised their hand. And when it came time to do it that day, Not 3 people showed up. 12. 12 people showed up. And they were helping her to walk. But as they were helping her to walk, what were they doing for themselves? They were walking also, and it was beneficial to them. You can see it coming true now. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. And so we started this walking club and kept at it. And I heard some talk about someone wanting to get started when it gets 10 degrees. Okay, well, let's go for it. In the middle of the winter. No, he didn't say that. But it's getting closer. It's getting closer. Now, I want to close with this one example. There was research done. You can see it. It was recorded in this book. Why good things happen to good people. Not bad things happen to good people. Why good things happen to good people. There were 137 MS patients. And they divided them into 3 groups. One, they were going to take an 8-week course on coping skills training. Another group was just going to receive a call from someone else, a fellow person with MS, just to see how they're doing, an encouraging call. And the third group were the ones that were trained to make the compassionate calls. Now, after doing this, and after some time elapsed, who benefited the most from it? Well, really, it wasn't the people receiving the calls. Those who took the training, they did get some benefit out of the 8-week course, but you know who benefited the most? The people who made the compassionate phone calls. They benefited the most. And so here we have good people who were already ill, and yet giving bolstered their emotional and physical well-being. So, keep trying to help people. If you see someone with diabetes that needs some help, hey, I've got these books up here. I'm gladly willing to share them with others. So if you come across someone that you know that has or is just recently diagnosed, you can take this book to them. I spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of work on it, not for them to sit on a shelf, but to help people. So that's one way. Come to the meetings, invite someone else to come. Let's encourage one another. And so here's what we're going to do. Some more tips coming up. Outsmart hypoglycemia, that's low blood sugar, with Smarties. And other ways too. Eat an early supper. Use time-restricted eating in the evening. Take a power nap. And use the glycemic index for carbs. In other words, whole foods. And then I've got several others after that. But let's try to put these into practice. And it's always good to reinforce what we're doing by hearing about it and then giving us more motivation to keep at it and keep trying at this.